While the US was focusing a lot on itself in recent years,
America first.
China has been looking beyond its borders.
开放带来进步，封闭必然落后。
Through its Belt and Road Initiative, Beijing has signed deals to pour massive amounts of money into more than 80 countries, promising transformative infrastructure and huge loans. Suddenly, China is challenging America's global sway.
We will not be intimidated, and we will not stand down.
The US is now coordinating its own response and making plans to invest overseas. So, what can America do to counter China's global expansion? Critics around the world have accused China of pushing poor countries into debt traps, which Beijing denies. Many countries that have borrowed heavily from China have seen their debt-to-GDP ratio soar in recent years. Unable to repay its debt to China, estimated to be about $1 billion, Sri Lanka handed over control of a major port to Beijing last year. Some see it as a cautionary tale.
That initial enthusiasm among recipient countries has been waning as many of them have not received the benefits that they expected to.
Experts see a high risk in countries like Laos, where a China-Laos railway alone costs $6 billion. That's a big chunk of the country's GDP. Cash-strapped Pakistan, after borrowing huge sums from China for road, port, and railway projects, is now asking for help from the International Monetary Fund. Overall, China's Belt and Road has allowed Beijing to establish deeper relationships with a number of local governments in Asia, Africa, and even Europe. But recent elections show that things can change quickly. Some countries that had been drawn into China's political orbit are now trying to backtrack. Mahathir Mohamad, the new leader of Malaysia, has called for the suspension of Chinese-backed projects worth more than $20 billion. He says those deals signed by his predecessor are lopsided. In the Maldives, a China-backed strongman was ousted in a recent election. Even though some European countries have partnered with China on infrastructure projects, 27 EU ambassadors to Beijing signed a letter criticizing Belt and Road.
There is a real craving for more alternatives to those Chinese offers. That creates a window of opportunity for the U.S.
The US has taken a first concrete step towards unlocking capital. The BUILD Act, the result of a bipartisan effort, paves the way for the creation of a new development finance agency. The US wants its agency to focus on private companies, unlike China's Belt and Road, that mostly directs funding to governments and has drawn allegations of corruption, which China denies.
With American companies, citizens around the world know that what you see is what you get.
Lending through massive state-owned enterprises on potentially loss-making investments is not really a model that the U.S. has pursued in the past. America would like to see these infrastructure needs met through private sector investments.
The main problem is that the American plan is tiny compared to China's, at least for now. The US is also joining forces with its allies in the region. America signed an agreement in July to coordinate investment in the Indo-Pacific with Australia and Japan. Tokyo already outspends Beijing when it comes to infrastructure in places like Southeast Asia, and Washington is looking to invest a little more than $100 million in digital projects and infrastructure in Asia. The exact terms of the alliance are still unclear, but the US is basically expanding a security agreement it has with Japan, Australia, and India, dubbed the Quad.
The Quad is looking to find ways to help those countries with more sustainable financing models, with higher accountability and transparency, with more protection against corruption.
Some say China's money generally comes faster and with fewer conditions related to safety and transparency.
I go to China, plenty of money.
In response to critics, Beijing has presented itself as a generous partner for developing countries. With its state-led model that makes it easy to fund large-scale infrastructure, China has a head start in this race for global influence. The US is now realizing it needs to catch up to protect its long-term interests.